Hello, how you doing? It's just gone 9 o'clock here in Portstewart in Northern Ireland. As we come to the end of another week in lockdown here, I hope you're staying well and staying positive during these extraordinary times. And what I'm doing is every weekday evening at 9 o'clock, I'm reading a chapter from my books. And at this stage, I'm on to actually chapter 10 of Paperboy. So this evening, I'm going to read chapter 10, and it's called, the title of the chapter is Paper Mom. As a good loyal paper boy, I accepted that Owl Mac could never be questioned. He was in charge and always right, even when he was wrong. It was the same with doctors, teachers, paramilitaries, ministers, and my granny. All of these were above contradiction. The School of Music was also up there in the same incontestable category. The big bosses there lived near Queen's University, could read music, and never dropped a single ing when they were speaking. If they made a decision, it was final. And so I was presented with a serious dilemma in the second year of my career in Owl Mac's employ when my School of Music timetable arrived in the post. My new violin lesson time would clash my paper round on a Monday night. This was as serious a clash as would ensue in our house when Man United were playing football on BBC One at the same time as Elsie Tanner was having an affair on Coronation Street on UTV. The bosses at the School of Music had the power to demote you in the orchestra to an even lower ranking than the second violins. Whereas at Spring Hill Primary School, I had been the leader of the orchestra, the first of the first violins. At the School of Music, I was already languishing so near the back of the second violins that I was almost a third violin. I already had some experience of the humiliation of being a third violin in the BRA school orchestra. This lowly function entailed having to count for 20 bars between short screeches the whole way through a 2 hour Gilbert and Sullivan opera, where all the parents with clean hands clapped and laughed at clever jokes by sixth formers acting and singing with English accents. I preferred Gilbert O'Sullivan anyway. The big chiefs at the School of Music had in fact so much power that if they were not happy with your performance, they could even take your borrowed violin back so that you had to buy a cheap Chinese one that still smelt of smoke from the bomb damage sale in Crimble's music shop. This would be on a par with Owl Mac taking your paper bag off you. The School of Music was across town in Donegal Pass in South Belfast. This was where my mother had lived in a wee street of terraced houses during the war, except when she was evacuated up the country where Hitler couldn't get her, to live with a posh lady in a big house with a rose garden in Ballykelly. Mummy's old primary school had been turned into the School of Music years ago, and children came to learn music there from all over the city. It was the only school I had ever heard of where Protestants and Catholics were allowed to go together, and nobody even tried to stop it. As far as this present dilemma went, I knew it would be possible to catch a bus from BRA, which would take me over to the School of Music in time for my violin lesson there, but I knew I would never get back home again early enough to be able to do my papers, even on a night when the buses weren't being burned. So I was indeed left facing a very difficult choice. This wasn't like my customers choosing between the TV times or the radio times, or their children deciding between the topper and the Beano. No, this was a big decision, like picking your O-levels or getting saved. I would have to choose between my music and my career. I wanted to play the violin like Yehudi Menuhin, or at least get near to the front of the second violins anyway. But I also wanted to have all the benefits of continuous secure employment with Owl Mac. It was surely cruel to expect me to choose between the two, but I knew that the violin lesson timetable was written in stone and no one would ever dare suggest it be changed. In spite of all of this, I eventually persuaded my mother to ring up the School of Music to try to rearrange the lesson. She was very polite and respectful, and she used her Gloria Honeyford telephone voice. But there was no question of any change. It seemed because my new violin teacher was English, apparently, and a very busy man. Told you, love, Mummy said, back in her own voice again as she replaced the receiver. You have to learn to fit in with people like that if you want to get on. This was without question, of course, and so my next problem was my paper round. Who was going to do it? My big brother was the obvious first division substitute, but he played rugby and sang dirty songs in the minibus on the way up to Mollusk on a Monday, so he was unavailable. My wee brother was still too young to do the papers because the full bag of Belfast Telegraphs was far heavier than him, and he would have just fallen over. Titch McCracken was not an option. The incendiary nature of his relationship with newspapers. The wee ginger boy with the national health glasses that I bullied went to bagpipe lessons in a kilt on a Monday night, and everyone else I knew was either a girl or already had a paper boy who had been sacked at some point by Owl Mac. I asked one of my Antrim Road friends from BRA if his father would give him a lift over to do papers on a Monday night, but his dad said no because he didn't want his rover being hijacked, he said. I was running out of options. It looked as if I was going to have to choose between two of my favourite things. It was terrible, like having to choose between Star Trek and Lost in Space. No, it was worse than that even. It was like having to decide between Olivia Newton-John and Farrah Fawcett Majors. So, who's joined me this evening? I want to say hello to everyone. Hi, Marty McCauley, listening again in California. Great to have you here, Marty. Hi, Mary Black. Yes. Oh, you had petrol blue parallel trousers, Mary. I'd love to have seen that. Hello, Ralph Porter, an old BRA boy. I've just been talking about BRA. Hello, Ian Parsley, Michael McKinley Sr. Good to have you again, and Brian Smith. Hello, Elaine Bonner. Thanks for joining me. Hi, Jim Poole. Great to have you here. Alan McLean. Good to have you, Alan. I hope you enjoyed the science fiction references there, Alan. Hi, Sadie Hannah. Hello, Nicola. I played the cello, but we didn't go to the School of Music. Okay, we went to the County Hall. Me and Mark Forty and the cellos. Oh, I remember that. The cellos. Yeah. Hello, Betty O'Riordan. Nice to have you. Hi, Kenneth Glenville. Good to have you as well. And so I'm going to continue the story of my dilemma of having to go to the School of Music on a Monday night and not being able to find a substitute paper boy. Everyone said my mother was a very caring woman because she was always looking after someone. If she wasn't looking after me and my brothers, she was looking after her father and mother, who took a lot of looking after her, or looking after 400 kids at the West every night. I sometimes made mum with a digestive biscuit because no one seemed to be looking after her. At the co-op, or sending off checks to the Great Universal Club Book, or making fish fingers and smash, or sewing dresses late at night for swanky ladies up the Lisburn Road. Sometimes when Mummy was having a rest for 10 minutes, she invited one of the neighbours, like Auntie Emma or Auntie Mabel or Auntie Hetty, who was my real auntie and brought me Lucozade when I was sick. She invited them in for a cup of tea and a slice of barmbrack loaf. They would chat about who in our street, apart from Mr. Grant, of course, was in bed with their chest, who was bad with their nerves, and who was looking like mutton dressed as lamb. Often, the most animated of these exchanges were concluded with the expression, bloody men. However, the best parts of these conversations between my mother and her friends were always whispered. I wasn't generally very interested in the noisier chattering, and I sometimes quite got annoyed if they were talking loudly while I was watching John Noakes jumping out of an aeroplane on Blue Peter. But when voices were lowered because children were present, I would tune in to listen to the secret stuff. Sometimes it was all about women's tubes, and I panicked and tuned out again immediately. But on the other occasions, I gathered fascinating information, such as speculation as to why, if Mrs. Piper was that good living, why did she have a fancy man from a gospel mission on the Newton Ards Road? I also learned that after Trevor Johnson's family had moved to Bangor, his dad had been arrested for hijacking a lemonade van for Ulster and was now in prison in the Maze, which was Protestant for Long Kesh. It was during that time that I was pondering my weighty choice between my career as a paperboy and my future as a virtuoso violinist that one Saturday afternoon I found myself privy again to one of these confidential conversations of my mother's. I was to glean a lot of information very pertinent to my situation, and more besides. Auntie Emma had called in to recommend that my father buy for this week's upcoming Westie Disco the new single by Demis Roussos, the big fat Greek man in a dress, which Uncle Henry said was going to go straight to #1. She was, however, too late with this sage advice because, as my mother explained, my dad was already on his way to Spinadisc to buy The Wurzels and Save Your Kisses for Me by the Brotherhood of Man. It was clear that the quality of music available around that time was so high that it was proving very hard to choose between singles each week, just like my impossible choice between papers and violin lessons. God love our Tony, my mother was saying. The poor wee crater has his violin lesson at the same time as his papers for Oil Mac, and he can't get any of the other wee lads to do them for him. His new violin teacher's English and he wouldn't change it. So he wouldn't, and he's a very busy man, so he is, no. Oh, God love him right enough, Betty, replied Auntie Emma. I don't know, sure your Tony's queer and good at the fiddle and all, and it Mrs. Tips at Christmas for buying the stamps, and sure Mrs. Mac's awful fond of him, so she is. I appreciated the sincerity of sympathy being expressed, but there had been nothing of great import in this conversation until, that is, Auntie Emma added mysteriously, and him with his bad heart and all, the wee crater. There it was again, my bad heart. Everyone knew it was bad except me. How many beats had it left, I wondered. This time I was absolutely determined to find out more, so I helpfully offered to make Mommy and Auntie Emma another cup of tea so as to give them space to discuss the matter in private in the living room, while I listened at the door instead of buttering Bambrek in the kitchen, as they thought. I felt like Captain Scarlet on TV, using an electronic listening device to spy on the Mysterons. Mommy and Auntie Emma were whispering, but I could hear every single word. What does the doctor say about his wee heart now, love? Auntie Emma was asking. Well, Mr. Pantridge says there's nothing to worry about, and our Tony should do all the same things as a normal boy, as long as he goes to get it checked up at the Royal every year, replied my mother. I was offended by the suggestion I was not a normal boy, but I still breathed a huge sigh of relief to hear that, contrary to all my fears, I was in no imminent danger of cardiac arrest. I was going to live. I had a future. I would probably live long enough to go to Spain and maybe America and have sex like Clint Eastwood in the movies and do A-levels and learn to drive and maybe even for my holidays in the year 2000. However, my speculation about my plans for the rest of my life was interrupted almost immediately by further revelations. It was when he had pneumonia when he was a wee baby and we nearly lost him. That's what done it till his wee heart, added my mother. I dropped the butter knife on the Formica kitchen table. When Mommy said they had nearly lost me, I knew she wasn't talking about the time I wandered off on my own into the meat store at the co-op and the butcher found me playing in the sawdust. I had, it seemed, nearly died as a baby. This was unbelievable. I had nearly been a tragedy. I almost hadn't lived long enough to pass my 11 plus, or smell Brute, or kiss Sharon Burgess, or get a ticket to see the Bay City Rollers. Mr. Pantry says lots of people with a heart murmur live normal lives, but that if our wee Tony needs to get any teeth out, he has to get them done in the Royal instead of the dentist, just in case, my mother added, showing off her detailed medical knowledge of my condition to her best pal. "Oh, God love the wee dote," repeated Auntie Emma. A few minutes later, I came back in with fresh cups of tea and buttered bambrack on a patterned faux brass tray. Auntie Emma commented, "You must be freezing, love. Your wee hands are shaking, so they are." "Och, he's a good boy, so he is," said my mother. "I'm just going to have to do his papers on a Monday night for him." I was shocked. This was the solution that had never crossed my mind. Girls didn't do papers, never mind mothers. Yet, when I thought about it for a while, I knew it was the perfect solution. My mother would never be late, and would never nick paper money or give cheek to the pensioners. No wee hoods or robbers from down the road would dare to try rob a mum, and so she would never need to hide any money in her good suede boots. Asked in disbelief. "Aye," Mommy answered warmly. I gave her a big hug, and I didn't even blush when Auntie Emma felt compelled to "Oh, God love the wee man. He's all grown up now, but he still does." And so, Monday night, for 3 months, my mother delivered 40 laughs in some scratched scales and plucked in the same road around which she had skipped as a wee girl in the war. She never complained once, even in the hailstones. I knew about the arrangement and had no complaints either. Regarded my parents and Auntie Emma and Uncle Henry as near saints for running the West East, keeping all them cheeky wee shites off the street on a Saturday night. Mommy even kept going after Big Aggie, the resident gossip queen of our street, cheekily asked her one Monday night if she wasn't making enough money from her sewing to look after her kids properly. It all came to an abrupt end when my violin teacher refused to teach me anymore because I didn't practice enough. In fact, he was to soon stop teaching altogether because he said we were all fucking lazy little bastards in this godforsaken country. Fortunately, I ended up with a nice new violin teacher at a more convenient hour. I took up the reins of my paper round again on Monday nights, and my mother looked relieved. This was one less thing for her to worry about. I never forget how Mommy saved my job, how she had prevented my career from being needlessly cut short when it had barely begun. I gave her less cheek for months and a bottle of Charlie perfume for Mother's Day, which was 20 weeks at 10p from the Great Universal Club book. Sometimes I even helped her with the dishes, and we laughed when I pretended to be the wee lad in the Fairy Liquid advert, asking her in an English accent, "Mummy, why are your hands so soft?" It had not been the first time Mummy had come through for me, and I knew in my heart, which was still a bad heart, but nothing to worry about now unless I had to get any teeth out, that it would not be the last time she would deliver for me. So there you are. That's chapter 10 of Paperboy. Thanks very much for joining me this evening. I want to say hello to you. Hi, Francis McGrath. Good to have you here. Thomas Lynham and Anne Kirk and Mark Burgess and the lovely Leslie is here as well. Thank you all for listening this evening. I'll be back again on Monday night and I'll continue with chapter 11 then. Until then, have a really good weekend. Stay home, stay safe and stay well. And stay positive. Bye for now.